햇빛이 짱짱 비치는 10월 26일 12시 17분 낮 12시 17분입니다. Can you see my face? 역광이라서 지금 해가 칭칭하니 기분이 되게 좋아요. 원래 오늘 아침 일찍 일어나려고 그랬는데 겨우에 또 늦게 일어났더라고요. Can you see my face? by the way? 하나도 안 보이는구나. 잠깐만. 일로 그렇다면 얼굴이 통통 부은 거는 이해해주시고 이제 아침에 이런 걸 입어야 되는 날씨가 됐어요. 그래도 햇빛 아래 있으니까 기분은 좋아요. 약간 따뜻하니. 그래서 오늘부터 제가 다시 시작한다고 한 영어 발음 연습하기, 영어 연습하기, 책 읽기. 보통 아침에 일어나서 약간 몽롱할 때 약간 잠 깨는 용도 스트로 조금 하긴 했었거든요. 할 때는 발음이 굉장히 어디 있는지 모르겠고 약간 혀가 꼬일 때가 많다거나 뭔가 영어를 연습해야 할 그런 게 없으면 저는 이런 식으로 기억을 하려고 해요. 저한테는 도움이 되는 것 같아요. 막 엄청 어려운 책이 아니더라도 항상 이 책이었거든요. 이 책 지금 몇 년째 갖고 있는지 모르겠는데 근데 항상 중간에 하다 보면은 일이 생겨가지고 이거 봐. 여기 이렇게 한 번도 끝까지는 읽은 적이 없어요. 이걸로. 그러니까 책은 읽었는데 그 발음 연습용으로는 끝까지 끝낸 적이 없는 것 같아요. 일단 이거를 펴고 오늘부터 하니까 책은 The Little Prince. 혹시나 내가 아는 발음이와 다르거나 이거는 발음 연습 용도이기 때문에 너무 이렇게 민감하게 듣지 않으셔도 될 것 같아요. 그냥 simsim하니까 해보는 거죠. 뭔지 아시죠? 그리고 저 아침이라 되게 말 헛소리 하는 것 같지 않아요? 되게 약간 I don't know. I'm mumbling a lot. 그럼 시작해야지. The Little Prince. 이걸 읽으면서 좋은 점은 분명히 제가 모르는 단어도 있을 거고 처음 본 단어도 있을 수도 있고 까먹은 단어도 있을 수 있고 근데 그런 거에 개의치 않고 그냥 읽어 나가는 게 목표입니다. 왜냐면 그냥 연습을 하는 거기 때문에 책 읽는 연습. Let's go. I believe that for his escape he took advantage of the migration of a flock of wild birds. To ᵒᴥᵒᴅ. Forgive me, children. I have dedicated this book to a grown-up. But I do have a serious excuse. This grown-up is my best friend. I have another excuse. This grown-up can understand everything, even books for children. I also have a third excuse. He lives in France, where he is hungry and cold. He needs to be cheered up. Do you accept my excuses? If not, then I will rededicate this book. I will dedicate it to the child that my grown-up friend used to be. All grown-ups were children first, but few of them remember it. So I will change my dedication to ᵒᴥᵒᴅ when he was a little boy. Once, when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book called True Stories from Nature about the primeval forest. It was a picture of a boa constrictor, is that right? Boa constrictor in the act of swallowing an animal. Here is a copy of the drawing. In the book it said, boa constrictors swallows their prey whole without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move and they sleep through the 6 months that they need for digestion. I pondered deeply, then over the adventures of the jungle. And after some work with a colored pencil, I succeeded in making my first drawing. My drawing number 1. It looked like this. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them whether the drawing frightened them. But they answered, frightened? 아씨, 방금 벌레가 온 것 같은데? Fuck, bro. 방금 벌레가 얼굴로 돌진했어. 아야, 뭐지? 벌인가? But they answered, frightened? Why should anyone be frightened by a hat? My drawing was not a picture of a hat. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. But since the grown-ups were not able to understand it, I made another drawing. I drew the inside of the boa constrictor that the grown-ups could see it clearly. They always need to have things explained. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups' response this time was to advise me to lay aside my drawings of boa constrictors, whether from the inside or the outside, and devote myself instead to geography, history, what is this? Arithmetic and grammar. Arithmetic and grammar. That is why at the age of 6 I gave up what might have been a magnificent. That is why at the age of 6 I gave what I That is why at the age of 6 I gave up what might have been a magnificent career as a painter. I had been disheartened by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. So then I chose another profession and learned to pilot airplanes. I have flown a little over all parts of the world, and it is true that geography has been very useful to me. At a glance, I can distinguish China from Arizona. If one gets lost in the night, such knowledge is valuable. In the course of this life, I have had a great many encounters with a great many people who have been concerned with matters of consequences. I have lived a great deal among grown-ups. I have seen them intimately, close at hand, and that hasn't much improved my opinion of them. Whenever I met one of them who seemed to me at all clear-sighted, I tried the experiment of showing him my drawing number 1, which I have always kept. I would try to find out, so if this was a person of true understanding, but whoever it was, he or she would always say, "That is a hat." Then I would never talk to the person about boa constrictors or primivores or stars. I would bring myself down to his level. I would talk to him about bridge and golf and politics and neckties. And the grown-up would be greatly pleased to have met such a sensible man. So I lived my life alone, without anyone that I could really talk to, until I had an accident with my plane in the desert of Sahara 6 years ago. Something was broken in my engine, and as I had with me neither a mechanic nor any passengers, I set myself to attempt difficult repairs all alone. It was a question of life or death for me. I had scarcely enough drinking water to last a week. The first night, then, I went to sleep on the sand, 1,000 miles from my human habitation. I was more isolated than a shipwrecked sailor on a raft in the middle of the ocean. Thus you can imagine my amazement at sunrise when I was awakened by an odd little voice. Here is the best portrait that later I was able to make of him. It said, "If you please, draw me a sheep." What? Draw me a sheep! I jumped to my feet completely thunderstruck. I blinked my eyes hard. I looked carefully all around me, and I saw a most extraordinary small person who stood there examining me with great seriousness. Here you may see the best portrait that, later, I was able to make of him. But my drawing is certainly very much less charming than its model. That, however, is not my fault. The grown-ups discouraged me in my painter's career when I was 6 years old, and I never learned to draw anything except boas from the outside and boas from the inside. Now I started at this sudden operation. What is this? Now I stared at this sudden apparition. Now I stared at this sudden apparition with my eyes fairly starting out of my head in astonishment. Remember, I had crashed in the desert 1,000 miles from any inhabited region, and yet my little man seemed neither to be straying uncertainly among the sands, nor to be fainting from fatigue or hunger or thirst or fear. Nothing about him gave any suggestion of a child lost in the middle of the desert, 1,000 miles from any human habitation. When at last I was able to speak, I said to him, "But what are you doing here?" And in answer he repeated very slowly, as if he were speaking of a matter of great consequences, "If you please draw me a sheep." When a mystery is too overpowering, one dare not disobey. Absurd as it might seem to me, 1,000 miles from any human habitation and in danger of death, I took out of my pocket a sheet of paper and my fountain pen. But then I remembered how my studies had been concentrated on geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar, and I told the little chap, a little crossly too, that I did not know how to draw. He answered me, "That doesn't matter, draw me a sheep." But I had never drawn a sheep, so I drew for him one of the 2 pictures I had drawn so often. It was that of the boa constrictor from the outside, and I was astonished to hear the little fellow greet with, "Ah," and I was astounded, S-T-O-U-N-D-D, astounded, and I was astounded to hear the little fellow greet it with, "No, no, no, I do not want an elephant inside a boa constrictor. A boa constrictor is a very dangerous creature, and an elephant is a very cumbersome." What is cumbersome? Cumbersome is 뭐야? "Where I live, everything is very small. What I need is a sheep. Draw me a sheep." So then I made a drawing. He looked at it carefully. Then he said, "No, the sheep is already very sickly. Make me another." So I made another drawing. My friend smiled gently and indulgently. "You see yourself," he said. "That is not a sheep. This is a ram. It has horns." So then I did my drawing over once more. But it was rejected too, just like the others.
This one is too old. I want a sheep that it will live a long time. By this time, my patience was exhausted because I was in a hurry to start taking my engine apart. So I tossed it off this drawing and I threw out an explanation with it. This is only his box. The sheep you asked for is inside. I was very surprised to see a light break over the face of my young judge. That is exactly the way I wanted it. Do you think that the sheep will have to have a great deal of grass? Why? Because where I live, everything is very small. There will surely be enough grass for him, I said. It is a very small sheep that I have given you. He bent his head over the drawing. Not so small, really. Look, he has gone to sleep. And that is how I made the acquaintance of the little prince. Acquaintance. 오늘은 여기까지. Yep.